Well, as I continue to work on these two stagecoaches that one time ran in Yellowstone Park, they don't belong to Yellowstone Park, these are my own personal vehicles, but we're finding out that there is a lot of duplication as I go from the 8-passenger to the 11-passenger. A lot of the joint work is just multiple over and over again. So I started doing these laterals last week, and I will start to do the rest of those and finish those up. And it's kind of like, you know, when I did the hotel window, I showed you that here a while back, a month or so, and I have 37 of them to do. Well, I showed you kind of the process of one, but it would be pretty boring if you had to watch 36 more of the same thing. And that's kind of the same thing here. So I don't try to show you every joint, but I try to give you the flavor of what I do in the process, and then I go ahead and do the rest of it as I'm doing here. Well, this is the last side on this 8-passenger coach of these lateral frameworks. So now I need to prepare this front curved frame, and I think I mentioned maybe in the description, I'm not sure, last time, that this lateral here is what is actually tying the front driver's box into the rear seat and the rear panel to make it all one uniform body. So this front frame we want to have flush with the main frame, and this is going to carry forward. And if I was to carry the seat frame height forward, this is where the top of the body panel would be. You would think this would be where the body panel would stop into this front curved frame. So there is a trim work on this body that's going to come up on the outside of this body panel. It's going to be 1/4 of an inch thick. Then the panel itself should be 3/8 of an inch thick. So this would get recessed down 5/8 of an inch. And where this meets the frame here, we are actually at 3/4 of an inch. So somewhere between this spot here and the top, we need to transition 1/8 of an inch difference. 3/4 here to 5/8 up here. So when I mentioned earlier that if I were to just run a straight edge off of the surface of the seat frame, that this would be where that side panel would be. But if I measure the old seat that I'm using as a pattern also, we'll find out that this may not be exactly true. If I measure from the top of the driver's seat, just on the framework here, and come down to this mark, I am about 17 3/4 where this mark would be. And on this old one here, if I come to this part here, which would be the top of the seat base without the seat, and measure down, I'm actually at about 15.5 to 15 3/4. So there's a couple inches difference between the seat height and where this body panel stopped on this old coach. So as I measure from the bottom of this main frame to the top of the seats, I am about 12 3/4 of an inch right there. So I have always factored in a 13-inch side panel for this area here. But when I have bent these in the past, typically I take a 14-inch board and bend it, because my rear seat is 1 inch higher than these two passenger seats. And typically this front section here is 1 inch higher or so. In this case it was 2, but it seems to be a little higher than the seat base. On the front here, it's really not a big deal. In the rear, it is more so, because I'm actually going to frame that rear seat 1 inch higher. That's why I bend a 14-inch board instead of a 13-inch board. So when I am putting in this notch in this front curved frame, I'm actually going to start out at the seat base height, and then when I get my body panel bent and fitted, where that extra height comes in, I'll make that adjustment then. But this is a good starting point. Because when it comes to actually installing this side panel, there's a little bit of variation that can happen there, and so I like to finish fit this at that point. So I had mentioned earlier that there is another vertical frame here, part of the rib cage for the rear seat, and that it should set a little bit taller. I had made a couple of these on the 8-passenger. The curve is wrong, but I think the height is correct. On the 11-passenger that I'm actually going to replace the wood and use that iron, this portion of that body is not there. But this is one that I have replaced years ago, and I salvaged it just for this purpose. So if I measure from the top of the frame, the main frame, to the top of this frame, I'm right at 11 inches. And if I put my straight edge on the top of the second seat, my yardstick here is 1 inch, and you can see that I'm an inch taller than the seat in the middle. So as I speculated, this rear seat needs to be 1 inch higher. And I did run to the storage shed that I have my other 2 Yellowstone coaches in it, one an 11 and one a 8, and they are all complete. And that one also measures 11 inches on both the 11-passenger and the 8-passenger. And these were the 2 main frames for the rear seat that I had cut out for this 8-passenger. And if I stick that in its position from the frame up, I'm also 11 inches. So the height has been verified. I just need to match this curve into this one, because this, I think, is too sharp, just like the rest of them were. So if I take the pattern that I made the rest of the rib cage for and lay it up against this 11-inch tall rear seat frame, I think I can just adapt that curvature to it. If I tried to just use this pattern, my joint work for the lateral is in the wrong position, and I don't have enough length on this bottom joint. So I'll just use this and add another 1/4 inch. So if I were to put the pattern I used for the rest of these seats right in there, it would be pretty close to lining up here. But actually I want it to be 1/2 inch in, because from the second seat curving toward the back, it's beginning that curve, And the frame of the rear seat is 1 inch narrower than the width of the frame of the seat right ahead of it. So I need to make that adjustment when I cut the tip in for the joint into the main frame. I want it to actually sit about right there. So I want this to set forward. This has a little deeper tip on it. The frame is actually 2 inches deep. It should be pretty close right there. Well, I gained, but I need another 3/8 of an inch. And that's just about right. And the depth in my joint is also much better. And where all my other framework is 1 inch, this one needs to be strong 1 3/8. So this is the beginning of the rear seat that will frame into the rear panel, which goes up and supports the top. And I also got those front curved frame pieces for the front of the panel shaped in as well. Step by step, starting to come together. Appreciate you coming along. Thanks for watching.